Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu says he is open to tactical pauses in fighting to allow the entry of aid into or exit of hostages from Gaza. Biden talks to Netanyahu about protection of civilians in the course of Israeli military operations. Netanyahu calls it a global battle against the axis of terror.
This is not a local battle. This is a global battle. The paramount need is to defeat this axis.
IMF official says India's GDP growth boosts quality and quantity of employment in the country. And 2 of 5 Indian states vote in key test for opposition ahead of 2024 national election. First up, the latest on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has again rejected calls for a ceasefire. Netanyahu said that Israel was engaged in a global battle against an axis of terror. He warned that the battle being waged by Israel against the Hamas terrorists in Gaza is one that could threaten Europe next.
The Israel-Gaza conflict appears to have no end in sight. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said no ceasefire unless Hamas releases the hostages. But Israel says it is open to pauses for aid.
Well, there will be no ceasefire, general ceasefire in Gaza without the release of our hostages. As far as tactical little pauses, an hour here, an hour there, we've had them before. I suppose we'll check the circumstances in order to enable humanitarian goods to come in.
Netanyahu has also stated that once the conflict concludes, Israel will take on an indefinite security responsibility in Gaza.
I think Israel will, for an indefinite period, will have the overall security responsibility because we've seen what happens when we don't have it.
Israel's defense minister has accused a top Hamas commander of seeking refuge in a bunker where his subordinates perished while battling Israeli forces.
Sinwar
is hiding in his bunker and let his terrorist commanders die in the field. On our side, the commanders stand at the head of the force, pressing forward, achieving objectives and leading the forces.
US President Joe Biden held a telephonic conversation with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, discussed potential pauses. White House in a statement said that the two leaders discussed the possibility of tactical pauses with opportunities to safely depart from areas of ongoing fighting, to ensure assistance is reaching civilians in need, and to enable potential hostage releases. United Nations has also called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, stressing that safeguarding civilians is the top priority in this conflict.
The way forward is clear. A humanitarian ceasefire now. All parties respecting all their obligations under international humanitarian law now.
Netanyahu has clearly said Hamas is using its own civilians as human shield and said Israel is acting in self-defense while minimizing civilian casualties.
And Sarah Coates joins us from Tel Aviv. Sarah, Netanyahu has ruled out a ceasefire, but He has told U.S. television network ABC News that he is open to considering quote-unquote tactical pauses in fighting to allow the entry of aid into or exit of hostages from Gaza. How will it be received in certain world capitals?
Hi there, Ramesh. Well, look, this certainly depends on a number of factors. Firstly, if these small tactical pauses are actually implemented. Secondly, how long they are implemented for. And third, what they would potentially achieve if they are to be implemented. But look, in saying all of this, there are so many nations, so many countries who've completely rejected pauses. They say that they want a complete ceasefire, a cessation of hostilities in the Gaza Strip, saying enough is enough. Now, as you just mentioned, Israel says that is not on the table. It says there will be no ceasefire until all of these 242 hostages are released from the Gaza Strip. So look, there's a lot still here to be seen after that interview that Benjamin Netanyahu gave late on Monday night. In your package there, that report that just played, he also said that Israel may take control of the Gaza Strip, the security control of the Gaza Strip indefinitely. And also on that, look, that's the first time we've heard this from the Prime Minister. Before that, we heard Israel come out to say that it has no desire to take hold of the Gaza Strip once again. And ahead of this, we did hear President Biden just a few weeks ago saying that it would be a big mistake for Israel to take control of the Gaza Strip. So look, there are a lot of negotiations ongoing right now about what a post-Hamas Gaza should look like. A couple of those options that have been put on the table, one of them handing over control of Gaza to the Palestinian Authority, while another could be an Arab coalition of players from right around the region having some sort of control over the Strip. But look, right now the focus is really on the fighting that is happening in the Strip and, of course, getting more humanitarian aid in, which is something that the United States has really been pushing Israel to do more of.
At the same time, Sarah, in the last month that you've spent in Israel, the Israeli military has come to encircle the Gaza city in the northern part of the enclave. So is an all-out assault on the Hamas imminent?
Well, look, that's certainly what it looks like, and that is what Israel has been repeating over this past month, saying that it is going into Gaza to, quote, wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. Now, the Israeli military put out a statement just a little while ago. It says that it's taken complete control of a Hamas military stronghold in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, saying that anti-tank missiles, launchers and other weapons and intelligence material were also found by troops. It added, though, that fighter jets have also struck a cell in the Gaza Strip, killing at least 10 Hamas fighters. So look, this is certainly what it looks like. Right now, the Gaza Strip has been divided, split in two, the north, the south, with the Israeli military vehicles seen along that road, splitting off the enclave in two. Now, it was only on Sunday that the IDF came out to say that it would go into Gaza City in 48 hours. It's now Tuesday rather. So look, that could happen at any moment, given the huge troop build-up we are seeing on the ground, Ramesh.
Sarah, thank you for now. Appreciate it. And in a display of solidarity, the walls of Jerusalem's old city were lit with photographs of hostages held by the Hamas. The faces of more than 200 Israeli hostages held by the Hamas were projected onto the walls of Jerusalem's old city on the eve of the first month of the anniversary of the Israel-Hamas conflict. All right, moving on from West Asia now to Europe. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine continues as Russia claimed to have destroyed multiple weapons while Ukraine forces thwarted Russian attacks in multiple directions in the past 24 hours. Russian Defense Ministry said that its forces destroyed several artillery guns and vehicles of the Ukrainian forces. On the same day, a report released by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces showed that more than 50 battles were fought on the front line. Meanwhile, Ukraine on Monday launched a criminal investigation for the soldiers killed in a missile strike during an awards ceremony on Friday. Condoling the families and close ones of the fallen soldiers, President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the incident could have been avoided.
Мої співчуття усім рідним, близьким, загиблих воїнів. Це трагедія, якої можна було уникнути. Міністр оборони Умєров доповів мені про заходи, які вжиті, щоб з'ясувати усі обставини того, що сталося. Головне – встановити повну правду про те, що сталося, і більше не допустити подібного. Кожен військовий у зоні бойових дій, у зоні дострілу та аеророзвідки ворога знає, як треба поводитись під відкритим небом, як дбати про безпеку. Зараз розслідування має дати рідним загиблих воїнів та суспільству чесні відповіді, як сталася трагедія і чи розпорядження були неправильними.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky believes that it is irresponsible to talk about holding an election in the country during wartime and called for unity to avoid pointless political discussions.
Що зараз у воєнний час, коли є безліч
And finally, the waves of any political divisive things must stop. We have to decide that now is the time for defense, the time for a battle on which the fate of the state and people depends, and not the time for the throws that only Russia expects from Ukraine. I believe that elections are not appropriate at this time, and if it is necessary to put an end to a particular political dispute and continue to work only in unity, the state has structures that are capable of putting an end to it, giving society all the necessary answers, so that there is no room for conflicts and someone else's game against Ukraine.
Now, as the Ukraine-Russia conflict drags on, EU officials are eyeing talks starting next year with Ukraine and Moldova. The European Union's executive will recommend the bloc open membership negotiations with Kiev once it meets outstanding conditions on Wednesday. A senior Ukrainian government minister said Kyiv expected the EU to provide a positive appraisal of its progress on the path to membership in a report this week. In its 3 decades of independence, Ukraine has sought to forge its own path as a sovereign state while looking to align more closely with Western institutions, including the EU and NATO. Meanwhile, the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, Olha Stefanishyna, says that everything that's been agreed upon has been implemented. Take a listen.
I think that for purposes of the assessment, when it comes to the 7 steps, everything which has been agreed has been implemented and done. Well, I would say that the assessment would definitely be positive because we have been in a permanent contact with the European Commission, discussing the steps and negotiating on the steps we've managed to implement. We were following the recommendations from the colleagues. We were listening to the opinions of the member states.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese visited China after a gap of 7 years. It was the first visit to China by an Australian leader. Albanese met Chinese President Xi Jinping and had extensive discussions regarding economic relations between the two nations. DD India's Andrew Wood reports from Hong Kong.
I think China has destroyed a lot of trust over the past 3 or 4 years with Australia. Australia, you may remember back in 2020, suggested it might be a good idea for there to be an independent international investigation into the origin of COVID. And Beijing didn't like that at all and then started shunning Australian exports of things like coal, barley, wine and so on as punishment. Many of those restrictions have been rolled back, but some of them still remain. So this is a start for them to be talking to each other. Australia needs China. Around about a quarter of its exports are to China. It's its biggest customer. And to a lesser extent, China does need Australia. It needs an awful lot of coal and iron ore and so on. And sometimes it's had difficulties trying to get that from elsewhere in the world. And it does show, I think, over the past few years, the limits of China's ability to use its economic power to coerce countries as well. So they need to rebuild trust. They say they're going to have a trusted partnership. But I think it's going to take a long, long time before the trust that was there 7 or 8 years ago when the last Australian Prime Minister visited returns.
And still to come on DD India News Hour. G7 foreign ministers gather in Tokyo for 2 days of talks. And former US President Donald Trump testifies in New York civil fraud trial.
India that invents. India that innovates. India that excites. India that invites. Land of possibility. Teeming with opportunities. Watch India Ideas each Thursday, 8 p.m. only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Top diplomats of the Group of 7 nations start 2 days of talks in Tokyo, the first such gathering since the Hamas attacks on Israel. G7 leaders have started arriving for the meetings, and they're expected to exchange views on the conflict as well as China's increasing maritime activities. Japan will host its second G7 foreign ministers meeting this year after the one in April. Japan also chaired the September meeting held in New York City. Japan condemns the terrorist attacks by the Hamas. It plans to convey its call for a humanitarian pause as the Israeli military encircles Gaza City. The G7 foreign ministers are preparing to hold an online session with their Ukrainian counterpart Dmytro Kuleba, as well as during their meetings in Tokyo this week. And Chris Gilbert joins us from Tokyo. Chris, how has the meeting unfolded so far, and what can we expect from it going forward?
Well, Tuesday has been a day of bilateral one-on-one meetings, and it started with Japan's Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa meeting with her Canadian counterpart Melanie Joly here in Tokyo, the two agreeing to cooperate together, their countries and also as individuals in the future. This is Yoko Kamikawa's first outing hosting a G7 Foreign Ministers meeting, and with Melanie Joly, she also thanked Canada for its involvement in the Joint Action Plan, which was announced earlier this year. Canada has, of course, deployed the HMS Vancouver to this part of the world to monitor sanctions or enforce sanctions currently in place against North Korea. That meeting was followed by a one-on-one between Kamikawa and her UK counterpart, James Cleverly, and a 2+2 with Grant Shapps, the UK Defence Minister. Of course, the UK and Japan have earlier this year announced that they're going to begin or allow each other to deploy military troops to each other's territories. This is going to be illustrated later this month with the second holding of Vigilant Isles, when UK troops train with Japanese self-defense force troops here in Japan. At the moment, right about now, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is paying a courtesy call, is what they're calling it, to Fumio Kishida, the Prime Minister. After that, he is going to meet with Yoko Kamikawa one-on-one before all the diplomats get together for the first time in this summit anyway for a working dinner tonight. But as you mentioned, Wednesday there is going to be the day of heavy lifting. 5 group sessions focusing on the major priorities, as well as outreach virtually, not just to the Ukrainian counterparts, but to counterparts from Central Asia as well.
Indeed, and Chris, the diplomats met once this year already in the month of April. So how will their talks this week in Tokyo differ from the last time?
Well, it's a much different world from April. It's a much different world from when Yoko Kamikawa called this meeting in September. At that time, obviously it was still some weeks before Hamas launched their surprise attack on the Israeli military, and then the weeks of Israeli, bombings of the Gaza Strip since then. That is undoubtedly going to be absolutely top of the agenda as these countries, plus the EU, plus the outreach partners, look to form some kind of solid framework for how they want to communicate their positions as the G7 going forward beyond this, and also their concerns, as they've stated, about any potential spillover conflicts that could potentially arise elsewhere in the Middle East. But there is also the important business to continue that they started earlier this year. They'll obviously want to catch up on how these countries have all been progressing on their individual complicated economic and diplomatic ties with China, while the G7 opposes what they call economic coercion by China and Chinese military assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region, and of course reaffirming what they've said as their unwavering support for Ukraine. The leader of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said the other week that he felt a little bit forgotten by some Western powers since the Middle East conflict erupted, and so they will undoubtedly be looking to reaffirm their support for Ukraine. Questions remain about whether that's going to materialize in any announceables of extra support or military assistance, but that also is going to be top of the agenda throughout the rest of the day tomorrow.
Chris, thank you for now. That was Chris Gilbert reporting from Tokyo. Moving on, Donald Trump has called a civil fraud case in New York election interference during his testimony. The former U.S. president clashed with Judge Arthur Engoron on Monday in the courthouse. Trump is accused of inflating his wealth to secure better loans from banks. If he loses, he could be banned from doing business in his home state. Sally Patterson reports from New York City.
Judge Engoron has already found Donald Trump, his adult sons, and some of his inner circle at the Trump Organization liable for fraud. Now he's trying to determine what damages the former president should have to pay. New York Attorney General Letitia James is also seeking to cancel Trump's business licenses in her state. And that could lose him many of his companies, including Trump Tower behind me. Donald Trump is accused of stating his apartment here was 3 times bigger than it really was. Similarly, prosecutors say his Mar-a-Lago resort in the U.S. state of Florida is worth somewhere between $8 and $27 million.
They had no idea what the numbers were when they said $18 million for Mar-a-Lago, and it's 50 to 100 times that amount by any estimation.
Trump said it was worth more than $400 million. Trump and his sons, who testified themselves last week, have sought to shift the blame onto their accountants. They say that banks should have verified their financial statements themselves rather than just relying on what was given to them. Trump also claims, as he does with several other cases he's facing across the United States, that the proceedings are politically motivated and designed to keep him out of the White House. He's running for president in 2024. Now, taking to social media on Monday, Trump called the case one of the many that's been instigated and brought by his political opponents, quote, crooked Joe Biden, for purposes of election interference. Speaking outside the court, Trump's lawyer, Alina Haber, she called Donald Trump one of the best presidents America's ever had, who has built a great company. She said that it's actually worth far more than the statements suggested, not less. She stated that the country is falling apart and called for an end to corruption in courtrooms, where attorneys, she said, are being gagged. Now that comes after the lawyer was told to sit down by the judge in the courtroom, who also demanded Donald Trump actually answer the questions being put to him rather than making long and at times rambling statements. This is a courtroom, he said, not a political rally. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
And staying in the U.S., President Joe Biden trails Republican frontrunner Donald Trump exactly a year before the 2024 U.S. election. Results of a poll show that 5 out of 6 swing states favor Trump over Biden for president in 2024. Those states are Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. Wisconsin was the only swing state to show Biden ahead of Trump. Biden defeated Trump in all 6 states in 2020, but Trump now leads by an average of 48% to 44% in those states, the polls showed. Take a look at some more stories making news around the world. Britain's King Charles will deliver the first King's speech on Tuesday as he outlines the government's policy agenda for the coming session of Parliament. He is expected to announce proposals for new oil and gas licenses as well as changes to criminal justice and housing. Britain's Prince William participated in dragon boat racing with expatriates during his visit to Singapore. Sporting a life vest and black cap, Prince William paddled in a slim boat alongside athletes from the British Dragons Dragon Boat Club. The eldest son of King Charles is visiting Singapore for the Earthshot Prize. Protesters took to the streets of Mexico's capital, calling for emergency aid for Acapulco's restoration weeks after Hurricane Otis's devastating impact on the coastal city. The protesters demanded of the government to speed up the release of resources to start reconstruction of the port city. Hurricane Otis made landfall in Acapulco 2 weeks ago, briefly cutting off contact for the 900,000 residents of the city. Peru's foreign minister resigned after less than a year in office amid criticism over handling of President Dina Boluarte's visit to the U.S. last week. As per reports, the minister was under pressure after failing to arrange a formal meeting between Boluarte and U.S. President Joe Biden. A replacement may be announced on Tuesday. And a group of protesters clashed with riot police in Spain's capital, Madrid, over the possibility of amnesty for those connected to Spanish province Catalonia's unsuccessful 2017 independence bid. The protests were held outside the party headquarters of acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who is struggling to form a government 3 months after an inconclusive election. And still to come on DD India News Hour. International Monetary Fund's Executive Director K.V. Subramanian hails positive impact of India's GDP growth. India's top court weighs in on pollution in the country's capital, New Delhi, calls for a stop to stubble burning in the neighboring states. And an Indian Air Force plane carrying relief material leaves for Nepalganj in quake-hit Nepal.
India that invents. India that innovates. India that excites. India that invites. Land of possibilities. Teeming with opportunities. Watch India Ideas each Thursday, 8 p.m. only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. A quick recap of the headlines. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu says he is open to tactical pauses in fighting to allow the entry of aid into or exit of hostages from Gaza. Biden talks to Netanyahu about protection of civilians in the course of Israeli military operations. Netanyahu calls it a global battle against the axis of terror. An IMF official says India's GDP growth boosts quality and quantity of employment in the country. From its GDP growth rate to its instant payment system, India's economic rise and innovations continue to make waves across the globe. More in the next report.
The Indian economy is being praised by leaders from world over. IMF Executive Director hailed India's GDP growth and highlighted the positive impact.
If you look at regular, employees and salaried workers, that number has increased from 11.5 crores in 2017-18 to 13 crores. In other words, a 1.5 crore improvement, which itself in percentage terms was 13% increase.
This is not the first time India is being praised. The country was seen as one of the bright spots in the global economy.
We have a growth rate for India which is 6.8 in 2022. Let's not forget, this is one of the bright spots in the global economy right now.
Let's also take a look at how India's growth has become the talk of the town globally. According to the S&P Global Market Intelligence, India will become the world's third largest economy by 2030, surpassing Japan. India's growth rate was also the second highest among G20 countries as per the World Bank. Top US Treasury official Jay Shambhog also hailed the country's instant payment system UPI for becoming a leader in cross-border payments. India accounts for the highest number of digital transactions, accounting for nearly 46% share as per the 2022 data. In April 2023, the World Bank projected 6.3% GDP rise for India. However, the country beat expectations to grow at 7.2% in 2022 and 2023. As of February 2023, in the automobile market in India, two-wheelers and passenger cars accounted for 77% and 18% market share during the year 2021 and 2022. India aims to double its auto industry size to rupees 15 lakh crores by the end of the year 2024. There's also been an FDI inflow of $33.7 billion in the industry from April 2000 till September 2022, which is around 5.48% of the total FDI inflows in India during the same period.
And Indian economist Dr. Nilanjan Banik joins us from Hyderabad. Dr. Banik, welcome to DD India News App. Now, I have a set of 3 questions for you. First, could you talk a bit more, if you will, about the data from the Periodic Labour Force Survey, which indicates improvements in quantity and quality of employment in India?
Yes, because every year what is happening, Ramesh, is we have around 15 million people who join the labor force. And because the economy is doing well, what we see is most part of the laborers who are coming to the market are getting absorbed. Now, if you again look into our unemployment rate, which is below 8%, which kind of showcase that Indian economy is doing well. And other parameters is, if you look into the Purchasing Manager Index or the PMI Index, both for the services as well for the manufacturing sector, you will find that this is actually nearing 60. Now, PMI Index, the way the index is calculated, it takes into account the new orders, it takes into account the employment scenario, it takes into account that whether the capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector is increasing or not. And if it is more than 50, it is considered that the economy is expanding. Now, for India, what we see is both for services as well as for manufacturing, the PMI index is right now hovering around 57, 58 as we speak, which also showcases that Indian economy is doing well. In addition to that, if you look into the corporate tax collection for the fiscal 2022-23, almost 1 trillion Indian rupees was collected in the form of corporate tax, which is part of direct tax. If we are talking about the GST, the collection went as high as 1.8 trillion Indian rupees. For income tax and as well as corporate tax, both taken together, it is 1.9 trillion Indian rupees. So what this numbers tells you? This numbers tells you that the business is booming, and therefore you have so much of both direct and indirect tax collection. And in fact, if you see the October number for the GST tax collection, it is around 1.7 lakh crore rupees. And so in a way, the Indian economy is doing well. These are the broad parameters on the basis of which we can actually argue that the economy is resilient of what is happening elsewhere in the world.
Dr. Banik, so we've discussed about numbers or quantity. My second question to you refers to the issue of quality. And this might interest many viewers watching this broadcast. How is quality of employment measured?
So typically, if you ask an economist going by the classical school of economics, the quality is measured in terms of the wage rate that you are earning, right? Now, what is happening in the context of Indian economy is we are seeing a huge transformation from the unorganized sector coming into the garb of organized sector. Now, let me explain what does it mean. It means that more and more people are now becoming credit worthy. Now, each and every time you are making a payment through either GPay or PhonePe, what is basically happening is this money is actually coming to the banking system. So basically, even if you're a roadside seller or a small, running a small mom and pop store, what is basically happening is because you're paying them through this formal way of paying, you are actually building the credit worthiness of this small businessman, which was not the case, let's say, even 6 or 7 years back. So in that way, digitization is actually helping us and the Indian economy to grow at a faster pace. Because earlier what was happening is even though you're paying, that money was not getting counted, and that was outside the realm of GDP numbers. Now, because you are moving more from the informal to the formal sector, what we are seeing, and mind you, this process has just started to happen. And therefore, we assume that this growth, what you see right now happening, is going to continue and going to sustain in the future as well.
And finally, Dr. Banik, some of the discussion is also centered around different sets of data. For instance, IMF Executive Director K.V. Subramanian says in an interview to Indian news agency ANI that CMIE data is quote-unquote not reliable as compared to the periodic labor force survey. Just so viewers know, CMIE stands for Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. Your thoughts, Dr. Banik?
So basically what happens is the way you are collecting the data, because most of the way any private source, data source, like the one you mentioned, they collect the data is the sample size is smaller, but if you are talking about, let's say, PLFS or the NSSS type data, you have a much more broader population size, which means that in terms of robustness of what we say in terms of the data being collected, it is much more precise. So in that way, I go with the government data which is collected over a period of time, not particularly with respect to a certain region, and more importantly, if you're collecting that data for a smaller period of time. Because if you're collecting data where the periodic interval is smaller, it is subjected to cyclical fluctuation, which may not be the case if we are trying to understand what is the long-term inherent trend in the data, which is there in the context of Indian economy, because the Indian economy is growing, and therefore one should look into a yearly or a long-term data as opposed to monthly or weekly data.
Dr. Nilanjan Banik, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And shifting focus from the economy now to environment, New Delhi is choking. The thick cloud of haze covering the entire national capital region is no ordinary fog, but a mixture of toxic fumes and chemicals. Air quality levels in New Delhi on Tuesday, even though it has reduced marginally, is still in the very poor category. The AQI levels, according to latest data, shows that it is hovering between 350 and 399. Now, this is at least 7 times more than the prescribed healthy air limit of the World Health Organization, that's the UN body. The Delhi government, meanwhile, has also decided to implement the odd-even road rationing scheme to control vehicular movement on the roads. Now, as stubble burning continues in the neighboring states, the Supreme Court, the country's top court, on Tuesday, pulled up the state governments, asking them to stop stubble burning immediately. Right, so as the report mentioned, the Supreme Court taking a stern view of the situation obtaining in the Indian capital city, New Delhi. But as you can see on your screens right now, a thick fog of smoke has also engulfed the city. Now, meanwhile, the top court directed the states of Delhi, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh to ensure the stoppage of stubble burning. The court made the local station house officers responsible for implementing the court's directions. The court also noted that a smoke tower installed as per earlier order is not working and therefore directed the government to ensure that it is repaired. All right, joining me is my colleague Vikas Sarthi from New Delhi. Vikas, has the court called for a complete ban on stubble burning in the states concerned?
Right, Ramesh, the Supreme Court has directed Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan to ensure that there must be a complete ban on stubble burning, though these states have given data that if we compare it with the previous year, the stubble burning cases have dropped drastically. In fact, Punjab came up with the data that this time there is a reduction of almost 40% cases in stubble burning. But court was of the opinion that these are just figures and it doesn't reflect in the air quality in Delhi NCR. And court said that we want you to ensure that there must be a complete ban on stubble burning. How you will implement it, it's your headache, and you use all your administrative arm, whether it is state police or other officials which are responsible for this, but they must ensure that henceforth, with immediate effect, these cases of stubble burning must be stopped immediately. Apart from it, court has also asked Delhi government to ensure that these smoke towers which it installed in Delhi at two places, those smoke towers are not working, and court said that it must be made functional as soon as possible. And apart from it, Ramesh, court has also asked chairman of Delhi Pollution Control Committee to remain present physically in the next date of hearing. So court has pulled up all these states, particularly Punjab, that they are just providing figure, though on the ground, on the real status, not much has been changed. Stubble burning cases are still being reported throughout the state.
Also, because as you have been reporting, the court has also spoken about the need for a long-term solution, especially a smoke tower. So will smoke towers help matters in the near term?
Well, right, Ramesh, court was of the opinion that there are some long-term measures and there are some short-term and immediate measures. As of now, court is much concerned about the short-term measures like stopping all stubble burning, like stopping movement of non-essential vehicles in Delhi particularly. And apart from it, court also gave some suggestions to the center that the major cause of problem in the Punjab is that in post-2000, there has been a huge increase in the paddy crop, and because of that, court was of the opinion that central must come up with a policy to introduce alternate crops in Punjab and discourage growing of paddy by reducing MSP prices. But these are long-term measures. As of now, as a short-term measure, court has directed all neighboring states of Delhi to stop stubble burning immediately, to stop burning of municipal waste immediately, and whatever directions have been given in the past as well by the Supreme Court to implement those directions in letter and spirit.
Vikas, thank you for your inputs. Vikas Sarthi reporting there from New Delhi. Now, voting is underway in the northeastern Indian state of Mizoram to elect the 9th Legislative Assembly. 52.73% voter turnout was recorded till 1 p.m. local time. More than 850,000 eligible voters will decide the fate of 174 candidates in the single-phase polling. The results will be declared on 3rd December. As the incumbent Chief Minister, Zoramthanga's Mizo National Front is seeking to retain its authority, a total of 174 candidates, including 18 women, are in the fray for the Mizoram Assembly election 2023. Now, voting is also underway for 20 of the 90 Legislative Assembly seats in the central Indian state of Chhattisgarh. Polling for the remaining 70 seats will take place on the 17th of November. More than 44% voter turnout was recorded till 1 p.m. local time. As many as 5,304 polling booths have been set up for the first phase of polling, covering 20 assembly seats. In the first phase, the political fate of 223 candidates, including 25 women, will be decided by more than 4 million voters. And now take a look at some other stories making news in India. Indian President Draupadi Murmu on Tuesday addressed the 35th convocation of Govind Ballabh Pant University of Agriculture and Technology at Pantnagar in the Indian state of Uttarakhand. The President, who is on a 3-day visit to the state, will also visit the Badrinath Shrine to offer prayers there. Also, she is scheduled to attend the 11th convocation of the Hemwati Nandan Bahuguna Garhwal University. A statue of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was unveiled in Jammu and Kashmir's Kupwara district on Tuesday. Maharashtra Chief Minister Eknath Shinde and Lieutenant Governor of Jammu and Kashmir Manoj Sinha were present on the occasion. An Indian Air Force plane carrying more than 9 tons of relief material left for Nepalganj in Nepal as the ongoing humanitarian relief mission continues. The Indian Air Force says that the overall relief material airlifted for Nepal is more than 21 tons. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Co-working giant WeWork files for bankruptcy in the US. Australia squares off against Afghanistan in a Cricket World Cup match. And a look at back at the life of Nobel laureate C.V. Raman.
How do you evaluate ISA's progress so far? Are you satisfied with it?
In terms of money, in terms of programs, in terms of memberships, all have gone up dramatically.
Has India played a satisfactory leadership role in ISA?
The Indian experience has led the ISA. Also, Indian financial resources have been at the heart of ISA moving ahead.
Who foots the bill around the world for solar energy?
Largely the private sector, but government guarantees are important for this to move into areas which are yet underserved by the private sector financing.
What is the first target that you would like to achieve?
The first target is get the regulatory structures in place so that solar becomes the energy source of choice.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. In business news, once the world's most valuable startups, the SoftBank Group-backed WeWork, has sought U.S. bankruptcy protection. The decision comes after WeWork failed to get more companies to use its office sharing space. Shares of the company have fallen roughly 96% this year as the firm struggles with a massive debt and hefty losses. The company reported estimated assets and liabilities ranging from $10 billion to $50 billion, according to a bankruptcy filing. Last week, the company secured a 7-day extension from its creditors on an interest payment to win more time to negotiate with them. Hollywood actors and union are still far away from any concrete deal. The Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, is evaluating the final offer from the studios. Take a look.
The SAG-AFTRA strike has ended its 114th day. The community said it is evaluating the last, best and final offer from studios and streamers.
They're ongoing. We're at the table all day, every day, and we are trying to get this strike resolved and get the town back to work.
The Actors Union said that there are several essential items that the two sides have yet to reach agreement on, such as the use of AI. The union has also said every member of its negotiating committee is determined to secure the right deal and thereby bring the strike to an end responsibly.
Look, we're in the business of telling stories, and that's what we want to do every day. So it has grind to a halt for a few months, and so we're going to try our best to get things up and running and get the output back up for our fans too.
Last week, union leaders expressed cautious optimism that a deal could be reached soon, but also said there were gaps between the two sides on various issues. The Actors Union and Studio, along with the streamers, have been back at the bargaining table and meeting continuously since October 24th. Tripti Tripathi, DD India.
Meanwhile, the United Auto Workers Union announced that its members at General Dynamics in Michigan, Ohio and Pennsylvania have voted to ratify their tentative agreement. The ratification of the tentative 4.5-year contract, which provides a 14% wage increase, inflation protection, shortens the time it takes to reach the top of the pay scale, and defeating the company's proposed healthcare concessions, was approved by 74% of its members. The deal has put an end on more than a month-old strike in October by the union against the Detroit 3 automakers in the U.S. And now to all the news from the world of sport. Australia are playing against Afghanistan in the 39th match of the ongoing ODI Cricket World Cup at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. Afghanistan won the toss and elected to bat first. They brought Naveen ul Haq in place of Fazal Haq Farooqi in the playing 11. Afghanistan are coming off with 3 consecutive wins, beating Pakistan, Sri Lanka and the Netherlands, and are currently standing 6th in the points table. While Australia, on the other hand, have brought Mitchell Marsh in place of Stephen Smith, who is suffering from vertigo. And Maxwell comes in for Cam Green. And despite making a dismal start in the tournament, the Pat Cummins-led side staged a stunning comeback, winning 5 games in a row to stake a claim in the top half of the table. A win in the upcoming game will help them secure their spot in the semi-final of the competition. Meanwhile, ICC Global Ambassador Sachin Tendulkar met the Afghan players at the stadium. India's former iconic batsman arrived during the practice session to raise the Afghan team's motivation levels. He gave them a pep talk and happily obliged them with photographs. The Afghan players were all ears to the Master Blaster's words of encouragement. Star spinner Rashid Khan described the moment as a very special occasion. Khan said that the meeting gave them lots of positive energy and it was a dream come true for many of his teammates. In tennis, Iga Swiatek regained her world #1 ranking on Monday. Swiatek dominated Jessica Pegula 6-1, 6-0 and won the season-ending WTF Finals in Cancun on Monday. Swiatek ends the season on an 11-match winning streak and will finish the year in the top spot for the 2nd year in a row, having lost the position to Sabalenka after the US Open. 22-year-old Polish tennis star collected 6 out of a total 17 career titles this season as she retained the French Open crown to lift her 4th Grand Slam trophy. Now, in the realm of physics, one name shines brightly: Chandrasekhar Venkataraman. Born in Tiruchirappalli in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu on 7th November 1888, Raman's journey from a young prodigy to Nobel laureate is nothing short of extraordinary. On his birthday, let's remember the man whose achievements in 1930 led to the Nobel Prize in Physics for unraveling the Raman effect.
In the heart of Tiruchirappalli, Tamil Nadu, a brilliant mind was born on 7th of November 1888. Chandrasekhara Venkata Raman, or popularly known as C.V. Raman, a name synonymous with the groundbreaking physics which forever changed the way we perceive the world around us. Born to a school teacher, Raman's early academic brilliance led him to graduate at the tender age of 16 with a BA from the prestigious University of Madras. At just 18, he published his first scientific paper in the British Journal. Professor Raman's illustrious career included a full professorship at the University of Calcutta in 1917 and knighthood by the British in 1930. In 1933, he became the first director of the Indian Institute of Science. He founded the Indian Academy of Sciences the same year, and in 1948, he founded the Raman Research Institute in Bangalore. The crowning achievement came in 1930 when Professor C.V. Raman was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for his groundbreaking work on the scattering of light and the discovery of the Raman effect. The Raman effect, a rare phenomena where only 1 in a million scattered light particles exhibit a change in wavelength, has found applications in diverse fields, from studying materials in chemistry and physics to telecommunication and nanotechnology. Professor C.V. Raman's legacy lives on as his pioneering work continues to inspire and shape the world of science and technology. Taposh Bhattacharya's report, TD India.
And that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website, ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.